The Civil Rights Movement was an important movement in the United States history. In a time of what seemed uninterruptible, African Americans took charge to change the way society functioned. From small towns to large towns, the history of segregation was halted in its tracks. So little were ready to accept a new future, while so many were persistent in leaving things alone. Without the brave few who stood up for African American rights, their rights would be undescribed and irrelevant. The Civil Rights Movement led to several changes in the government, people, and events in the United States society. The beginning of the Civil Rights Movement started in the mid-1950s. The Civil Rights Movement is an event that took place through 1954 to 1968. Before this event, segregation was a common thing in the United States. It meant that African Americans and white people each had separate everything from each other. Separate neighborhoods, separate areas on buses, separate water fountains, and separate schools. The spark of this movement was the resistance Rosa Parks showed by sitting on the white side of the bus. After this, African Americans all over the country took charge and demanded change. This demand for change took place in the forms of speeches, marches across the country, and protests held by citizens. Through these events, many well-known activists emerged. Without the help from the courageous activists, the rights of African Americans may have never been changed from what they were before the Civil Rights Movement. One of the many important activists during the Civil Rights Movement was Martin Luther King Jr. In the book Martin Luther King Jr. by John A. Kirk, he states Martin Luther King Jr. was a potent symbol of developing new black movement in the United States. He also continues to talk about the many different speeches Martin Luther King Jr. gave during the Civil Rights Movement. Speeches like Give Us a Ballot, Our God is Marching On, and his most infamous speech, I Have a Dream, all played a major role in showing African American citizens around the world and the movement was real and change was coming. Another important activist that played an important role during the Civil Rights Movement was Rosa Parks. Rosa Parks, often referred to the mother of civil rights movement, she was arrested on December 1st, 1955 for refusing to sit on the black part of the bus. She did this because whites were allowed to sit on the front part of the bus and blacks were forced to sit in the back. This started the Montgomery bus boycott by more than 17,000 black citizens. These two figures were some of the few that drove the ensuing issue of segregation. They pushed the movement's potential beyond anyone's wildest dreams and helped motivate thousands of Americans. Throughout history, African Americans and minorities have had to fight for equal rights and freedom. The Civil Rights Movement began in the mid-1950s and led to many different changes that helped African Americans gain their rights and freedoms. Many different activists emerged from this movement that helped others bring change to not only the government but the society as a whole. Without the help from many different activists, speeches and marches, and protests held by people, these changes in society would have never been able to be accomplished.